Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Resonant Frequencies. I'm your host, Nand, and in today's episode, we're going to be talking about a concept called Mercury Retrograde. I want to give a shout out to one of our subscribers, Shifra, who reached out and asked if we could do a show about Mercury Retrograde. So, what we'll do is we'll talk about what is Mercury Retrograde, what does it do, and then we'll end with how to deflect its impact or minimize its impact. Mercury Retrograde is when a planet has influence over the planet that we're on, Earth, and on each one of us. So if you look at our 9 planets in our solar system, we do have a Mercury, and we do have an Earth. And each of these 9 planets have their own orbit around our sun. So if you think about it, some of these planets are really close to the sun, and some are very far away. Jupiter, Saturn, for instance, are farther away than the Earth is. So if we had the sun in the middle, and we had planets going around the sun, or around the sun, then we begin to get a better visualization of what's happening. And if we draw concentric circles of orbits, then dead center is the sun, and the closest one circles or orbits the sun in a narrower orbit. And as we move out away from the sun, the orbits get larger and larger and larger. So during the time of Mercury retrograde, because the planet has its own orbital path, it appears, if we look at the illustration that I've described, then at times, it looks as though Mercury is going backwards relative to the Earth. It really isn't. It's going on its own orbit. But as the Earth moves around the sun and Mercury moves around in a smaller circle or orbit around the sun, there are times it appears that it's going slower than the Earth, or retrograding. Now, Mercury retrograde is an astrology concept, and it influences, again, the Earth and those of us that are on the Earth. Not too dissimilar than our own moon, which at times controls the tides, and at times shows up as a full moon and impacts us in very funny ways, or ways that are not normal, given a normal daily cycle. So we're looking at, again, an orbit of a satellite, in this case the moon, but around the Earth. And that orbit of the moon around the Earth follows a certain path. So we have a day, we have a night, and the day goes lighter and the night goes darker. But what illuminates the night could be a moon. So we know how it impacts us. Most of us sleep at night. How do we know it's night other than looking at our watch? Well, when the moon rises, the sun begins to set and day becomes night. So there are influences, as I described: high tide, low tide, day, night, during the moon cycle around its orbit of the Earth. So when Mercury is in retrograde, certain things begin to happen to us. First of all, communication becomes a challenge. So it's a good idea to really be clear about the words we're using and the information verbally we're passing on to others, say in a conversation or in writing, say via an email or a text. So during a Mercury retrograde, astrologists might suggest for us to take our time, be clear, and go slowly. And that's pretty correct, because if you follow those guidelines, then the probability of miscommunication diminishes. So what are some of the other things that occur during a Mercury retrograde? Well, another one, as an example, might be if you start something new during a Mercury retrograde, then the chances of it completing are very slim. So, if I buy a toaster oven for my kitchen during Mercury retrograde, then chances are that that oven is not going to be productive for me, or it'll have complications and it'll fall apart faster. So if I were to buy a piece of electronic, whether it's a car, a computer, a toaster oven, the general consensus is we don't do that during a Mercury retrograde. Same thing holds true with contracts. Again, we're talking about communication. So would I sign a deal to purchase a home, for instance, during a retrograde? Chances are it's not going to be productive for me to do that, because inevitably either the deal falls apart or there are going to be complications. So again, because of Mercury retrograde, we wait until we're out of retrograde. How many times does Mercury retrograde occur? We'll go back to my drawing about the orbits. And if you follow the orbits in a given year, that is the year of an Earth year, then Mercury occurs about 4 times a year. The duration of a retrograde is approximately 3 weeks. Sometimes it's a few days more, sometimes it's a few days less. So to just be aware of this concept makes life simpler and easier. Now, if you like what you're hearing, please hit the like button, ring the bell, subscribe, and share this video. Now let's proceed with how to minimize the impact of the retrograde. The retrograde, in this case Mercury retrograde, impacts those of us on the planet, and it impacts our subtle energy body. So in prior episodes, I've talked about subtle energies, and so what this does is it impacts the subtle energies to a point where all these other things that I described earlier that are present during a retrograde impact us. So similar to the moon and the earth, high tide is an impact, low tide is an impact of the cycle of the moon. So it disturbs our bodies in a way that we cannot see or sense, other than knowing that there is a disturbance in the subtle energies space. One of the best things to do to offset Mercury retrograde's impact is it's a great time to do meditation. And meditation changes the mode of the frequency in one's given subtle body. And when that occurs, then it begins to synchronize in a more clear way with the retrograde process, and it begins to diminish the impact, whether it's communication, whether it's starting something new, whether it's purchasing an electronic item. Now, most astrologers would probably advise against this. But here at Creative Life Sciences, we've created specific protocols that assist those that are in need of help in resynchronizing their subtle bodies so that it becomes more in tune with the impact of retrograde. If it does that, then the impact of the retrograde begins to diminish. If you'd like to hear more about this, feel free to reach out, or if you want us to help you during a Mercury retrograde process, just send us an email, explain what's going on, and we will go ahead and set you up so that subtle body that's emanating within you begins to change its frequencies to adapt to, or deflect more so, the impact of a retrograde. I hope this has been a good response, and I look forward to seeing you in upcoming episodes. Thank you.